Meredith Pellrain. I'm the Humanities Career Engagement Specialist. So I host events like these and other kinds of career events, workshops, job talks. I also do career advising for humanities students, basically all things career related. I'll pass things to Kim for a quick introduction, and then I'll give you a little overview of the plan for today.
Hi, my name's Kim Angulo. Call me Kim, she, her pronouns. I went here, I loved it, and I'm here to talk about it. And my career, not just Sanford's.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you all are here today. Thank you for joining on Zoom and in person for braving the rain. We appreciate you. The plan for today is going to be, this event is being recorded. I see no one is in the path of it, but just to let you know, if you were to move up this way, you would be in the path, so just be aware of that. The plan is that we will have about 45 minutes of planned questions in advance, and then I'll invite you all to share your questions. At the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for that. For Zoom folks, if you want to put your questions in the chat so you don't forget them, you're welcome to. I'll turn to the questions at the end there in those final 15 minutes. But you're also really welcome to wait and unmute yourself when we get to that point. With that, I think let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Awesome. So to start us out, please can you please briefly describe your career trajectory from your undergraduate education to what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I came here between 2009 and 2013, graduated in Fem Studies. And then I got into a fellowship program called the Capital Fellows Program, which I put the name on the board, which is a year-long paid internship pretty much to work in state government, but I worked in the legislature doing policy. So I worked for a state assembly member, actually the state assembly member who represented Santa Cruz and Monterey, doing policy work. And then I did that for 3 years. I got a job as a legislative aide, did that for 2 years, 1 year with a fellowship, and then I went to law school. I went to UC Davis for law school, graduated in 2019, and then throughout law school interned at public defender office in Angulo County, which is where Davis is. Loved it. It's like, this is what I'm doing with my life. Tried civil rights law for a semester, so a little bit of insight into that. And then I got hired as a public defender. I did another fellowship right after law school because it was hard to get hired right out of law school. And so I did a paid fellowship through UC Davis, and then I worked at the San Joaquin County Public Defender's Office in Stockton for 3.5 years, did representing clients' misdemeanors, felony hearings, felony trials. So I've done probably about 16 trials, like jury trials. And now, for the last 1.5 years, I've been at the Sacramento Public Defender's Office, did felony trials for about a year, and now I'm in the misdemeanor mental health diversion unit. So essentially, I try to get people who have been charged with misdemeanors, who have a mental health or drug issue that they're dealing with, to get treatment, do treatment, and after a year, the case gets dismissed and sealed.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to kind of walk back to the very beginning of your career and drill in some more detail. So when you first graduated, you started working at the California State Assembly. What first drew you to policy work to begin with? And what do you think were the things from your undergraduate experience that set you up to be able to apply for those kinds of jobs?
Politics was just kind of crazy, not that it ever is not crazy. So I was just kind of really engaged and interested in it in general. And so I had no idea, like I knew that I wanted to do policy or I wanted to explore it, but I couldn't afford to do like a paid internship or anything like that. And so I didn't have any experience in undergrad. I didn't do any like internships or volunteer work. I thought about trying to do like Planned Parenthood in San Jose, but I didn't have a car, so it was like very limited in like what I could do. And so I told a professor about it, Professor Zabea. She's retired now, but I took like 3 Latin American Latino studies classes with her, and like she was terribly intimidating, but also wonderful. And so I went to her office hours, despite being terrified. And I told her that I was interested in policy. She had prior students who had done the Capital Fellows program. And I started exploring it. And then turns out that like my partner's cousin had done the program, and just ended up talking to people about it and getting some insights in how to apply and all that kind of stuff. And then applied. It's a very competitive process. There's 18 people there's 4 different branches: the executive, assembly, senate, and judicial. I got an interview for the assembly, and it's a whole process. I would love to talk to anyone who think everyone should apply for it. Even if you don't want to do policy in the long run, it is a fantastic experience to get. So then I did so much prep for that, and then I got it. And I was really nervous at first because I was a feminist studies major, and a lot of the people in my cohort were political science, policy, politics majors, and I felt like I was not gonna know things that they knew, and that was not the case. I feel like I knew more things about things. Like, I had taken Latin American Latino studies classes, I'd taken feminist studies classes, I knew about issues with prisons and jails and incarceration rates and all that kind of stuff that I was practically useful. Like, it wasn't all new information for me, and I already had an idea going in. So it was great. And then just, it's a lot of writing, reading, analyzing things, which is pretty much what I did for undergrad.
I think that's also a really good reminder. Something I often like to say to students is that like different disciplines, whatever you study in undergrad, is going to give you a different sort of set of perspectives and a way to approach questions. And all different kinds of, certainly humanities disciplines, for those of you, give you fantastic training. And it's more so a matter of kind of how you position yourself in the story you tell. I feel like I'm hearing that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I single majored in feminist studies. Like it was like, my parents were not super happy with me at the time. But it was, I think, it was the best decision because it kind of helped me figure out what I was passionate about. And then I was able to use that. By the time I got in the Capitol, I had, written my senior paper about solitary confinement of juveniles, and then I got to the policy world, and nobody wanted to touch criminal justice, prisons, jails with a 10-foot pole. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? This is the issue, and I already had so much knowledge just studying and reading and everything here.
And could you tell us a little bit more, what was your day-to-day work like at the State Assembly? I know both when you started as the Assembly Fellow and then also as a legislative aide. What was the day-to-day?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same for the fellowship and the legislative aide. They do a really good job just including fellows as though you're just a regular staff member. So it was, 8 to 5 job. I worked inside of the Capitol building. I worked for an assembly member. There were about 5 other staff in my office. So chief of staff, legislative director, and then legislative aides, and the assembly member. Essentially, assembly member has meetings with constituents, people from the district, people lobbying for different legislation, different issues that would come in, and I had a specific set of issue areas. So whatever meetings were in my issue area, I would be in the room with the assembly member, just sitting there taking notes, ask questions, right? So that was kind of a chunk of the day. The other part of it was I had to make vote recommendations for every single bill in my issue area. So any potential new law that was in health, human services, judiciary, which is like all of the courts. All of these issues were mine, and so I was the expert in the office on it. And so I had to read bills, analyses, and give a recommendation and explain to my boss, what does this bill do? Should you vote for it? Who are the people who are for and against it? What are the potential political ramifications? My first boss did not care about the political stuff. It was wonderful. But my second boss, she lived in a purple district. She was Ventura County, and she had flipped the seat from a Republican to a Democrat. And so there was a lot of political considerations and things like that I had to try to convince her to vote for things that were good and give her a good political reason for it. And then the third part of the job was that I would staff legislation. So my boss would have, introduce 12 bills that they're new laws that they're trying to get passed. And my job was to be the point person for 3 to 5 of the bills. So I was the expert. I was talking to other offices, going around and talking to other staff, trying to convince people to vote for the bill. Yeah. And writing fact sheets, writing information this is what the bill does, this is the goal, here's who's for it, here's why it's important. So a lot of listening, reading, writing.
Can I ask a sort of specific question in, especially for that second component where you were advising on anything that fell into your policy area? Was that something where it was everything was sort of tagged as one specific area, or were you sometimes it's both this thing and this other thing, and so you and someone else in the office are kind of giving your different takes and seeing how they.
Yeah, it's a good question. So how it works is every piece of legislation that's introduced, it's called the Rules Committee, they assign it to a committee for the committee to do the hearing before it goes to the General Assembly. So any bills that were referred to committees that were my issue areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was gonna go to the Health Committee, it was mine. It can get referred to 2 different committees, which would happen, but normally it's a mini one.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly a health bill, but it's also taxes or something. There's also a little part of it that's something else, but yeah.
That makes total sense. Awesome. So I know you stayed at the State Assembly for 3 years before pivoting, transitioning, and deciding to go to law school. How did you know what made you think it's time to move out of politics? And then also what made you think, okay, I think law school is going to be the right next step here?
Yeah. That was a very hard, long determination. I knew that I didn't want to work in policy long term. I think this is a student question that I can kind of get into a little bit. I liked it and I also hated it. I liked it, just the opportunity was amazing. I met hundreds of people who were willing to help me because of the network of the fellowship program. I learned about things that I had no idea about, and it was great. And there were some bills that were mine that got passed that I'm really proud of. I did one my first year that was a bill to get people who are coming out of prison a state ID card. They don't give you anything when you get out. And so I was really proud of that. And also, the policy process is so slow. And I felt like it was so far removed from my career life, people. And so I just decided I wanted to do direct services more instead of policy work. I have a lot of friends who stayed in policy work, and it's good work, it just wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that I wanted to focus on criminal justice stuff. It was always my passion. And so I used my network at the Capitol there were a lot of lawyers, a lot of people who went to grad school. I got coffees with people. I said, what should I do? What do you think? Everyone told me not to go to law school. Every single person. And I talked to like some current students who were at UC Davis Law, and they were like, they liked it, which was like shocking. Everyone said law school sucks. And so I decided that the jobs that I wanted after school, I needed a law school degree for. So I knew going in that I wanted to do one of three things. I wanted to represent people who are charged with crimes, like public defender work. I wanted to work with people who are in prison or jail, or help re-entry work, so people coming out of being incarcerated. So those were like my three top, these are the topics, these are the things that I would like to do as my options. And so I figured that out, and I was like, okay, law school makes the most sense to be in those fields. Yeah.
This wasn't one of my original questions that I'm gonna ask anyway. How much did, since you knew going into law school, you already had the sense of which kind of thing you wanted to do, how much did that factor into your application process and the programs that you looked at?
A lot, because I was looking for a law school that was public interest oriented. That's what how they call it in law school. Essentially human focused. You're not like gonna go work for a big corporation, big, huge law firm, you're representing big business. It's more like nonprofit government work. And so I knew that I wanted to go to a school that had good programs for that. So I applied to a bunch of different law schools, really with the focus of wanting to have good professors, good programs in that kind of area. Yeah. And UC Davis is a very public interest oriented school. It's not, people don't really go there very much to do corporate law. So I had a good culture.
Different environment from what many law schools are like.
Right, no, this is not like cutthroat, tearing pages out of books just about, like mess with someone else. Like it was very, I really liked law school. Yeah, I really liked Davis.
Awesome. So then tell us more, how did you, so you went in, you had the sense, one of three things. How did you then end up landing on being a public defender? What were the things that guided you toward that? And what were some of your considerations as you were deciding between those three areas?
Yeah, it's really the network that I got from the fellowship that helped me a lot. So my boss, who was my fellowship year boss, her name's Rebecca, she had a family friend that she gets like Thanksgiving with every year, who's a public defender in Angulo County. And so she connected me with him. I got coffee with him. I was like, he showed me around the office, he introduced me to other people. I asked him if I could be a public defender and not like public speaking. And he was like, yeah, totally, I don't like it either. So I really liked our conversation and what he said and how he talked about clients and everything. And so he worked at the YOLO Public Defender's Office. And so by the time I was in law school, I had met him. And I was like, I want to intern there because I like him. And there were various other things. Like I went into the office with Ron, is his name. There was an attorney who just had a really rough day in court and was like upset about something that had happened with her client. And she was like crying, and they were like comforting, and it was really like positive, like human, So I was like, yeah, I like this. I want this, I want to be around people who care. Yeah.
Which that too isn't always in every legal environment. That's certainly not the case.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely much solidly the culture in public defender offices there.
yeah, definitely. You said that you had this uncertainty, or one of the questions you were asking was, what if I don't like public speaking? Were there other sort of skills or areas that you were worried about? And then I'm going to ask you about skills that you were excited to use and that you have used. But first, what about those things that
I mean, I was nervous about direct services, honestly, because I had only done policy work. I didn't grow up in a community that was impacted by over policing or like mass incarceration, and so I felt very out of place. Like, what am I doing coming into this setting? I don't know anything. Any like personal like lived experience. And so I was nervous about that. And then I was nervous about the public speaking, like speaking in court. Yeah, those were I think the two main things, just like the direct contact and working with clients and the public speaking. But now I love both of those things. I don't love public speaking in general, but it's very different speaking in court when I'm advocating for a client. It's not about me, it's just my job is to advocate for my client. And that's a much easier thing to do, to step out of and be like, no, I'm not gonna be shy about this. Like, if I don't say it, nobody's gonna say no. So, I'll say it.
Yeah. I think that's such a good example of kind of the meaning that your work has being just so formative for what your actual experience is of any particular activity you're doing, right? Especially if you have one of these like, values-driven careers like you do. So like I said, I want to then ask also about skills. What are some of the skills that you think in both your legislative and policy work and then in your work now, what's kind of the crossover in skills that you think have served you well in both of those areas of work?
I think both of those and undergrad is writing. Like writing and reading things and just being critical of things that's like the base of everything. Working in policy was really helpful in terms of doing public defense and law because I was used to reading code sections. I was used to reading the law because that's what I would do when I was in policy work. We were changing the code sections, changing the laws, and so I was used to that. I had seen it before. I had experience with the state website, that has all the penal codes and everything in it. And I knew how the legislative process worked, and I knew how laws got passed and the politics behind how laws got passed and like the intent behind the laws because I had worked there and seen it firsthand. And so that was really helpful. I thought it was helpful. It wasn't necessary, but it was nice to have.
I love that also as an example of something that I'm often telling students is that the slow way is the fast way, like the things that you do leading up to it ends up being the thing that you ultimately really want to do and stay in long term. Those other things can often set you up for like being able to do that thing better.
Yes.
And especially I think with law school and with careers in the legal field generally, having some kind of prior experience especially that gives you like this special insight. Seems like it really sets you up in a different kind of way.
Yeah, I'm glad that I worked before law school, but you don't have to, for sure. You can just go straight to law school. It's really expensive, so it's just like if you have an idea of what you want to do vaguely, that's probably better. Instead of just like going in totally blank.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Are there any, so I know you were talking about writing, are there any specific things, any specific classes or anything like particularly from your UCSC coursework that stands out as having been particularly good preparation, or was it sort of experience overall?
I mean, I took a lot of classes that taught me things that I see in real life, which is pretty depressing, but I think what it taught me, what I learned in classes too, was just like the empathy and knowing that I don't know people's lives and like being open to learning about people's perspectives. And I feel like that was a big I don't know, like a theme, in fem studies and humanities. It's just like learning about the history of things. It's like, when during the Black Lives Matter protests were reading like the New Jim Crow, like, and I see all of those things in my job. And I learned about all of it. Well, not all of it, but I learned about, like, my base of knowledge was from classes here. And I took all sorts of, I took psych, I took sociology, I took Latin American Latino studies, I took feminist studies classes. Every single one was helpful in just my ability to like see the world, if that makes sense.
Definitely. So I'd like to move into kind of advice sharing. What would you say for students who know they want to do impact-oriented work, but don't necessarily know what kind, who are maybe considering politics, maybe considering legal work, maybe considering other things? What advice would you give for kind of figuring that out?
Talk to people. I know it can be really intimidating. That's one of the best skills that I learned during the fellowship program is how important networking is. And the word networking is just so silly, and people say it all the time, but we're like, what the hell does that mean? I think what I learned in working in the fellowship was that people like talking about themselves. People would love to get to get coffee with people, and you just say like, tell me about your career, like how did you get where you are? And I did so many of those like informational interviews. I did so many of those, and it was just so, you build a connection with someone, you learn about how they got to where they are, gives you ideas, and then they are now a connection who can let you know if there's something that pops up that they're aware of, or they have recommendations. Everyone has different circles, different connections, and so that helped me actually get my job at the Stockton Public Defender's Office, is because of my connections to people through policy work. I think in general, what you can do now, which is, you can also do those things, cold email people. Like, you find someone cool online, just email them. Like, just email me, and say, hey, I'm a student, here's what I'm interested in, I would love to talk to you and learn more about XYZ. And the worst thing they're gonna do is not respond. And the best thing they'll do is be like, yeah, cool, let's do a Zoom or let's get coffee or something. And then you're not losing anything. Highly recommend doing that. It's not as scary as it seems it would be. Yeah.
In attempts at trying to reach out to people, did you encounter situations where people weren't open to it, or did you get a lot of no's? And if so, how did you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah. I think I had a different experience because I was a fellow when I was doing that. Because the fellowship program has been around for 50 years, and everyone was a former fellow or new fellow, you know what I mean? And so there was this sense of community behind it. Oh, you're a fellow, yes, of course I'll talk to you. Which was a huge benefit of the program. I think in general though, I've done that to other people, when I was meeting with people coming in to, advocate for laws in the assembly, I met a public defender who came in, who worked in San Francisco. I told him I was interested in law school. He was like, yeah, call me, let's talk about it. We had an hour phone call, and then I went out and shadowed him for a day, in the office. So there's I don't know, it doesn't hurt to try, and one person can give you connections to other people, and that's a really kind of easy way in. Alumni is also a good place to start. Yeah. The other main advice is letters of recommendation. Like actually pick a professor that you're like into and talk to them. I know it's terrifying. I don't know. I thought it was absolutely terrifying. But Professor Zebea wrote me recommendation for the fellowship and she wrote me a recommendation for law school. And just like having that connection is you need a letter from a professor for the fellowship and you need at least one for law school. So it's very important that you make connections with professors.
I'm gonna take a moment both to echo that and to encourage anyone who has any hesitation about going to office hours or chatting with your professors about the things that you're interested in. Please don't hesitate to make an appointment with me or with someone in Career Success to kind of talk through how you can think about approaching office hours in that kind of way. I also want to give a quick plug. Couldn't have been better had we planned it. Next week I'm doing a workshop about informational interviewing. So I hope very much that you'll come. Everything that Kim has said about the value of informational interviewing, I will be echoing. We'll also be walking through a worksheet where you'll like actually prepare and you'll leave at the end of the 1 hour workshop ready to like step out and send the email and actually like schedule and get started talking to someone. So please do that because it is fantastic advice and really, really well worth your time. I want to talk specifically when it comes to advice for a moment about for law school particularly, for anyone who knows about that, you already gave the excellent tip about thinking about letters of recommendation in advance and cultivating relationships with faculty. What else would you say for anyone who specifically knows already that they probably want law school sometime in their future?
Applying to law school is its kind of own beast. I mean, I think if you're in undergrad now, thinking about applying to law school, just like having a good GPA is actually really important. It really depends on where you can get into law school, what your GPA is, and what your LSAT score is. Also, like what your experience is, where where you write an essay about here's who I am and here's why you should admit me, right? But the first thing that law schools look at is GPA and LSAT score. They don't really care about what major you were. They don't care what major you were. If you were a chemistry major going to law school, they'd be like, okay, cool, you're gonna do patent law or something like that, right? If you're a psych major, like it really doesn't matter what your undergrad degree is in for law school. There's like prerequisite knowledge that you need to go to law school. They teach everyone that. I think letters of recommendation, I used to people like I've worked with. I had one of the assembly members I worked for write me a letter of recommendation, and I had a professor. I think just the talking to people, like talking to a lawyer, talking to people in law school, like I could get into a lot more detail. I think it's just like where you want to go, the ranges, like the state. I think it's the LSAC does the LSAT, like coordinates the testing and stuff. They have charts online where it says, okay, if you have this GPA and you have this LSAT score, where are you most likely to get in? What are the ranges for each school? There are unaccredited schools, there are accredited schools. Accredited schools generally have a much higher bar passage rate. Could be that because you've got higher scores, you're more likely to pass the bar, or whatever it is, or it's the school or whatever it is. The other thing is, once you get in somewhere, financial aid, they will give you money. And I used that to negotiate for more money. I got into UC Hastings, and I got into UC Davis, and I didn't hear back from Davis until like, I thought they were just gonna say no. But, so I thought I was gonna go to Hastings, which is now UC Law, yeah. And I didn't really want to. And so they had given me a certain amount of money, and then I used that to negotiate more money for Davis, and it worked. I got like another $5,000 or $10,000.
I've heard a similar story from other people, so that really is definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like it's really awkward to ask for it. Like, hey, can I get more money? But like again, like the worst thing they're gonna say is no. And they're used to it. Like I think it's one of those things, especially like non-cis white men could ask for it.
Can you also share any advice, Kim, on to what extent you think location for law school matters in terms of where one wants to live and where one wants to practice law after law school?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the name recognition of the school, honestly. So somewhere like UC Davis, it's a big school, it's a well-known school. If I were to move to LA or another state, people are gonna know what UC Davis is, typically. If I went, there are like more smaller local colleges. There's one in Sacramento called McGeorge. If you go to McGeorge and you live in Sacramento, there's a good network there. If you go anywhere outside of Sacramento, nobody's gonna know what McGeorge is, and you're not gonna have the same network and opportunities. I also wanted to go to law school in California because I knew I wanted to practice here. You do learn more state-specific things. It's not the end of the world. You can go to law school in New York or DC or whatever and take the California bar. It's totally fine. But I knew that I didn't want to live anywhere else, and I wanted to live in California still for law school. So the name recognition is a thing for jobs. Not as much when you're in like public interest nonprofits, public defenders offices, they don't care as much. But I think it does make a difference.
Well, those were all the questions that we had planned in advance. We have 20 minutes left here and would very much love to hear from you all. Zoom, I'm going to quickly, while everyone's gathering their questions, Zoom, for anyone who joined us later, I'm dropping in the chat a link to the little registration form where you can enter for our raffle, which we'll do at the very end. But yeah, what questions do you have? What do you wish we had talked about that we haven't yet? If you're on Zoom, please feel welcome to unmute. Please feel welcome to drop in the chat, whatever you prefer. And of course, in person, just.
You can ask me about being a public defender. I feel like I didn't talk about that much.
Does the undergrad school matter for law school? Like the prestige of where you go to in your undergrad matters?
I don't think so. I think, okay, if you're going to like if you're going to Harvard, sure, right? But generally, no, I don't think so.
How about for like T14?
Probably. Like it just depends on what they're looking for. I mean, I think if you're like just like a top 14 law school, like kind of the biggest ones that you think of, it includes like Berkeley generally and UCLA, very near the top. I think if you go to like a school like Santa Cruz, but you have a really good GPA, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean that's at least my perspective, but I also didn't go to Berkeley or UCLA to know what the makeup of is. There's definitely people who go to UCLA and they go to Berkeley for law school or go to Berkeley for both undergrad and law school. It's for sure a thing, but being here is not an exclusion. Yeah.
But like, what are your thoughts if I were to transfer to a UC with an actual law school?
Oh.
Instead, because UC Santa Cruz doesn't have a law school, so they wouldn't have as much resources as UCs that would have law schools and have like connections and network that could get me to like T14.
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was at UC Davis, did not have any interaction with undergraduate students. There wasn't like crossover. The undergrad students didn't ever come into the law school building. There wasn't like extra opportunity for the undergrads that I'm aware of. I never saw that. The professors who teach the law school are law school professors. They're not teaching undergrad students. It's a grad department. It's its own thing, so it's very separate from the undergraduate. So I don't think that that's necessarily any sort of benefit. Schools do though, and UC Davis specifically the law school has a like a program where if you're interested in law school, I think it's geared towards like first time law school people and their family. They have a program where I think it's a few weeks long over the summer, where you can go and they will teach you about law school, teach you about the application process, just like give you information about it in a very concentrated way that's helpful. And I think I know Davis has it, and I'm sure other UCs have it, something like that as well. So I knew people who I went to law school with who did that program beforehand. Because then you also make the connections, those are put on by the law school. It's also up to you. You know what I mean? If you want to do that, you can. I didn't. It's also, I think there's a difference between if you want to go to law school to do a big law firm. Big law firms care about where you went to school. They care about if you're top, 10% in your class. Public interests do not. They care about if you're a good person and a good lawyer, not if you got all A's in your law school classes. Yeah. Thankfully.
Can I also add one note just to echo again what you were saying about, in addition to like the grades and the LSAT questions, there's also the letter of recommendation piece.
Yes.
And that being really important, that being something that you can get, both with your faculty, but also say if you do end up taking some time after undergraduate before going to law school, that getting like really solid letters of recommendation is another factor that you can be thinking of.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of work you do before law school.
I should also say I did not do good on the LSAT. I got like a 164, which is like very average, mid. It's not good. So I could have retaken it, but I hated the experience. And so I was like, I like myself too much to do this to myself again. And so I just didn't. And so, but like I had good GPA, I had good letters of recommendation, I had I think a good essay. So I was like, you know what, I'll get in where I get in, it's fine. So it's not like you don't need to be Elwoods and get like a 179. That's not, love that movie.
I see Megan on Zoom. Please go ahead.
Hello. So I'm interested in public policy and the more legislative earlier in your career stuff, for me personally. And I was wondering, I was looking into master's programs for public policy, but it's so expensive. And I'm just wondering, do you think that's beneficial? What's your thoughts on that? I don't know.
Apply for the fellowship program. That's my number one.
Okay.
You can apply for it direct. It's actually, the applications are open right now. They close December 8th. All you have to be is over 21 and with a bachelor's, or graduating that, the next year. Apply to all the three: executive, assembly, and senate. Judicial is a little different. It's not it's like being court staff, not a lawyer. I do have friends who went to public policy school. I considered it instead of law school. My friends who did it, just kind of because of my network, they were people who did the fellowship and then went back to school afterwards. And they all typically had some specific reason to do it. I have a friend who went back, who did public administration, and now he works doing affordable housing for the city of San Francisco. So he did that specifically for it. I tend to think that some experience is better than just going straight into a master's program, but I don't know, I would be aware of like what their career services are like how good of a connection do they have to the community? What kind of internships do you get during grad school?
Got it.
Yeah, things like that, like internships during grad school, that's where you get the job.
Okay, sweet. Thanks so much.
I see we have 2 more questions that have come in over the chat, so I'm gonna read them aloud. So the first is, you touched on feeling out of place, not coming from a marginalized background, / having the same lived experience as the people you're serving. How have you dealt with that? Do you find it's changed the way you go about your work, or was there a learning curve for you to know how to navigate that? Or just any advice for those in a similar situation?
Yeah. Before I went to law school, I volunteered. There's a nonprofit in Sacramento called Loaves and Fishes. They're a homeless services nonprofit. They had a jail visitation program. And so essentially it started because people who were unhoused would get picked up, be in jail and have nobody to visit them and just be sitting there alone. And so I volunteered for that while I was in school, or while I was working at the Capitol. And it was like an hour a week just going and visiting her. I got assigned to one person. And that was my first, I did that because I wanted to try direct. I wanted to try interacting directly with another human being, you know what I mean, who's not like also in college or also in policy, you know what I mean, like, and it wasn't as scary as I thought it was gonna be. And I think in my job now, my favorite part is working with clients. I think I try to come in as not like the lawyer who knows everything and I'm gonna lecture you and tell you what to do or not to do and here's what, you know, I don't have all the answers, but just being able to listen and make sure that I am saying things in a way that's normal, not legalese, not some inaccessible way. And I think for me, just like being able to listen and not thinking that I know everything has really just been my kind of way to do things with clients. I can't assume to know what's going on. I mean, there's things that I hear all the time from clients that are like, wow, that is a different world than I have ever experienced. I had a client tell me that every single person he knew uses drugs, like uses meth. Like, what a world that I don't have. And so it really just helps like get to know them and their experience and to be able to talk to them in a way that is more real for them. Yeah.
That makes sense. I have one other in the chat. First, I'll just make sure, does anyone in the room in person? I don't want to be missing anyone.
What are your thoughts on double majoring?
Go for it if you want to. But like, I don't think I didn't. Most of my friends didn't, actually. I would have majored in Spanish, but there wasn't like a Spanish language major, it was just linguistics, like language studies, and I didn't want to take linguistics classes. But I like studied abroad in Spain and took all the classes, but I didn't have a major. If you want to, go for it. I don't know that there's a huge benefit practically, unless it's some specific thing that you're gonna combine to like be your career.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the other one that we have in from the chat is, can you talk more about your work with incarcerated people and what it's like representing someone who is or is facing incarceration?
I love it, and it's also really hard. It's so I've done a range of things, right? When you start off as a public defender, they have you do misdemeanors. Misdemeanors, the maximum time in jail is 6 months to a year. So it's supposed to be like lower stakes. It's not always lower stakes. Someone can be deported because of a misdemeanor, even a misdemeanor arrest. There's all sorts of life impacts, job impacts, licensing impacts for someone. So for starting, I think it helped to start off in misdemeanors though, because it's so, you learn a lot of the skills with realistically a much lower risk, right? Worst thing that can happen is not as bad as going to prison for 25 years. So I think, what was the question was?
That just more about your experience working with people who either are or are facing the possibility of incarceration.
Yeah. A lot of my clients are in jail. So I visit them in jail. I get calls from the jail. I talk to family members whose, family member is in jail. I like doing the work because my clients typically don't have anyone advocating for them at all. When they're in court, it's the judge who wants them to take a plea to get out of the courtroom, and thinks they're guilty, no matter what, and thinks they're probably some not great person. It's the district attorney who really hates them, who's trying to get them convicted and send them to jail or prison. It's court staff who are inconvenienced by anyone taking any more time than just quickly taking a plea. There's nobody else in the room except for me who can talk and advocate for my client. And so it's a really powerful thing. It's something I take very seriously. And it's a lot of pressure. Getting to know clients is a lot of hearing all of their trauma, right? How did they get to this moment? It's a lot of their history and what happened. I think for me, it's been a journey, right? It's kind of always making sure I take care of myself and my mental health. I have a very specific, I do that intentionally to take care of myself because it can be really hard. I lost a trial. My client was found guilty after trial, and I 1,000% believed him. He testified. He was the sweetest human being. He's doing meditations in between the trial breaks. That was heartbreaking, and it is heartbreaking, and it's also something if I'm not, I know that I can do it, and I know that I'm a good attorney. I know that I'm gonna give my clients as good of an experience as they can have, and feel like someone's advocating for them. So I've represented a lot of people where the recommendation based on everything is you should probably take this deal, right? You're gonna go to prison. This is what's gonna happen. And I think it can be both frustrating that I don't have as much control in the system, as well as just good that I'm there to help them through it. Yeah.
Can I, it sort of expands on that question for you to talk a little bit about the difference in your experience between trial work versus what you're doing now in mental health diversion and
Yeah.
how, and especially the like your own mental health component of it, how that's been
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Lots of therapy. Do therapy. So I've done trial work hearings, which is really, jury trial, like what you might see on TV, right? When you get jury duty, I'm one of the attorneys that's asking people about, can you be fair? Who are you? What's your background? That kind of stuff. I get to cross-examine witnesses. I get to cross-examine cops. That's my favorite thing to do. I want to destroy all the cops on the stand. It's really fun. I get to, make opening statements in trial. I'm doing closing arguments and arguing about why the cops suck or the DA's wrong, or it's a little theatrical in a way that I didn't realize I would think was so fun. And it's very much being in the moment and being on it, which is exhausting and also so invigorating. And so there's a lot of just being in court, being a public defender. It's probably the public defender and DAs are the most in court attorneys ever. Like there's no other job that you're more in court for. So that's what it is for trials, right? And there's kind of the in-between court dates where you're seeing if you're negotiating, seeing if it's gonna resolve, making sure you have all the discovery, all the paperwork, all the videos, the body cams. And then that's what I did for 4 years. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing mental health diversion, which essentially is none of my clients' cases are set for trial. They have all been submitted an application for mental health diversion, and my job is to make sure that they're connected to a mental health or drug treatment provider. I work with social workers. I've got 2 social workers who are pretty much assigned to my caseload, who help me and the clients navigate practical world experiences. And then I'm in court trying to get them granted, trying to make the case that this client should be accepted into the program. This is all the work they're doing, essentially humanizing. A lot of my job is humanizing people. That's what a trial is about. That's what talking to judges and advocating for clients. It's just this is a real human being who's not only their charge.
We're right at 1:30. I will do the drawing momentarily. I just resent it on Zoom. If you're in person and you haven't done the QR code, please do. I'll do one final request. Any questions before any more questions? We'll ask some really good ones.
What advice would you have for a 4th year that doesn't feel like they've been very on top of it right now, trying to figure out who to reach out for letters of rec, and I really feel like I haven't really made that connection with professors, done office hours. So what advice would you give to someone that's in that position?
Yeah. It's never too late. If you're graduating in June, you have professors this semester, you have professors next semester. Just go to office hours, and it's never too late to make those connections. Or go back to a professor that you liked who you're not taking a class with and say and it's okay to be honest and be hey, I'm trying to make connections with professors, I haven't done this and I'm nervous about it. They're real people, even though it's kind of scary. And Is there like another aspect that like internships or something that you're like worried about? Or?
Yeah, like for example, like the fellowship right here, I feel like it's very interesting, like up my alley. Just you said that we need like a letter of recommendation, and I'm like thinking, and it's already like late in the quarter, it's already like 7. I'm like, I don't know how I would be able to approach a professor this kind of late, being like, oh, I'm gonna have a letter of recommendation, especially if I haven't like entered their office hours this far into the quarter, and like how to approach that.
Have you taken just like a small class?
Right now I'm in my senior seminar currently, so I was thinking about approaching that professor, but how would that? I feel like I'm nervous to
Totally.
do that, since especially I haven't like gone to his office hours yet. It is an intimate class.
Yeah.
I just like wouldn't know how to approach.
I mean, I think if the professor knows who you are,
Mhm.
and they clearly know who you are, if it's like a senior seminar, just like go in and talk to them and just say like, hey, look, like, I really like this class. I want to like, here's what I'm interested in, and just tell them what you're interested in. I like when people are honest and real, right? It's like, oh, I'm really nervous about this. Oh, this is what I'm interested in, but I have no idea how to get there. I think people are more willing to help than you think that they are. And I think if you talk to that professor, they'll definitely write you a letter back, right? They're gonna have interactions with you every week. They're gonna kind of learn who you are based on the conversation in class and stuff.
Just kind of go for it.
Just go for it. Just literally go for it. There's no like, yeah. And then I didn't do any internships in undergrad. I just worked, so that didn't prevent me from anything.
All right, I want to be mindful of our time. Pizza was delivered while we were all chatting here, so it's there. Please feel very, very welcome to dive in. I won't go over there myself quite yet while we wrap up, but please head over there whenever you would like. Take advantage of what Kim very kindly put up here, right? All this information. I'm so glad that you all came today. If you have anything further that you want to think about or talk about related to anything that came up today, or career possibilities generally, I really encourage you to make a career advising appointment. I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone in attendance with some details about that kind of thing.
Can you send that by email?
And I will send it. Yes, I'll send it in my email as well. And I'm also going to be dropping it in the chat in just a moment. And if you haven't seen those of you who are on Zoom, I also put a link to the Capital Fellows program in the chat, so hopefully you can find that there.
Feel free to reach out to me. I love talking with students. I love helping people do these things because there's just no way to get into it if you don't know someone. So now you know someone. So yeah, text me, send me an email. Truly, even if it's not like something that I've done that you want to do, if you're interested in something else, I know a lot of people, right? Like I have a big network of people that do all sorts of things. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks so much, all. Appreciate you. Glad you came. Dive into pizza.